Okay, well, as we go through the presentation, let's not forget that today's the first day of spring, so we're turning the page over on the calendar. Looking at the MODIS image this morning, about 95% of our area is snow covered. We can see the very southern extent of Long Island, very coastal New England into some of the valleys, even up into the Champlain Valley. There's some bare ground showing up. As we hone in on the satellite image, a very nice picture of the ice on the eastern part of Lake Ontario. And you can see the Finger Lakes opening up. That area just to the northeast of the Finger Lakes was in the area of a pretty prolific lake effect band a couple days ago. It came off of Ontario being wide open. So yeah, a nice lake effect band for March. And of course in southern New England, our tidal rivers have all opened up. The Hudson, the tidal is opening. Connecticut opening. So all the bays and estuaries are pretty much open. Looking at where we've been the last 2 weeks, the jet stream has retreated a bit, and we had a mild interlude for a few days in southern and central New England. But basically below normal temperatures have prevailed the last 2 weeks, especially New Hampshire and Maine. Snow events continued in the north with rain, snow to a mix in the south. Snow depths in Swee have snow water equivalent has definitely been eroded away with the slow melt in southern New England, but there's been no melt up in northern New Hampshire and much of Maine, which is an issue for April as we look at it now. Precipitation across the northeast the last 2 weeks was below normal, except in western Maine we had slightly above normal amounts, as you see in the lower left graphic. And the last 2 weeks, as I mentioned, the center graphic is from the Northeast Regional Climate Center. Below normal temperatures across the Northeast, especially in northern New Hampshire and Maine. And then we looked at the lower right graphic is the last 60 days departure from normal precipitation. This covers most of the time we got snow here in eastern New England, and much of the precipitation was below normal, except for the Boston area to Cape Cod and far down east Maine, slightly above normal. But what made it slightly above normal was the last inch of precipitation that fell in the event this past week. If we look at our 90 and 80-day precipitation departures, the 90-day for the winter is showing departures below normal just about across our entire warning area, service area. The 180-day departures, we can see that from the very wet October and part of November that the coastal areas were above normal, but interior and western areas into New York below normal precip for the last 180 days to 6 to 8 inches below normal precip there. Looking at our current snow conditions, the top left, snow depths are over 2 feet in just about all of interior and eastern Maine, up to almost 50 inches down in Robbinston, Maine, up on the Canadian border near Calais, Maine. And the amounts dwindle to 12 to 18 inches in the Boston area, with less than that south and west into Connecticut and southern New York, less than a foot. Snow water equivalent in southern New England, we're basically 3 to 5 inches. We've lost 10% of our Swee in the last 3 weeks, so that's 30% off the total of 8 inches. Now we're down to 3 to 5. The snow water equivalent in Maine is generally 5 to 8, with up to 10, 11, 12 inches in far east and down east Maine. Lower left graphic, we can see from the recent cold, the snowpack is colder than it was 2 weeks ago. We're all below 32 degrees in the pack. And the density is generally 25 to 30%, but we do have some areas showing 30 to 40% in central New York area. And the lower right-hand graphic is the latest observations we've gotten from Maine, the snow water equivalents, many 5 to 8, a few 10, 11-inch snow water equivalents. So that's going to be an issue going into April. We look at our current USGS streamflow conditions. What's interesting on this graphic is we looked at this the last month or so. You can see the color changes from no runoff and no melt from snow, which is the below normal colors of oranges and reds. You can see that whole line through the eastern part of the country has shifted now into southern New England, where we have had some runoff with normal to even slightly above normal stream flow. Of course, where there hasn't been any snow melt, we're running below normal stream flow, much of New York and central northern New England. Groundwater has recovered somewhat in southern New England with some of the runoff, but basically very low groundwater levels in much of New York into northern New England. Our water supply and lake levels in New York City, the water supply is nearly 20% below what it should be this time of year, and it's because of less than normal precipitation through the winter, and what has fallen is still locked in the snow mostly. So they're running below normal. Quabbin levels are normal. Situate Reservoir is up 2 feet from 2 weeks ago, but still about 3.5 feet from spilling. And Lake Champlain continues below normal, but we can see a little upturn in the current observation as some very slight melt is beginning. Our soil moisture, river ice thicknesses, and frost depth chart. The Palmer soil moisture indices, short-term dry to normal, and the longer-term near normal soil moisture. River ice thicknesses, of course, the January to March accumulated freezing degree days are much above normal due to cold weather. Half a foot to 1.5 foot plus ice thickness. Central New York, northeastward into Maine. Many openings south of I-90 in southern New England and southeastern New York. We've had a series of breakup jams on the Wallkill River, Cattaraugus Creek, Buffalo Creek, Casanova Creek, and the freeze-up jams continue in Maine on the St. John's, Aroostook, Penobscot, Kennebec. Frost reports we have today, we do have 19 inches in Burlington, 12 at Jericho, 7 at Newcomb, Vermont, northern Vermont. Looking ahead to the pattern, we're seeing below normal temperatures and slightly above normal precipitation for week 1 and 2. The left graphic is our 48-hour QPF, which has anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch across southern New England into eastern Maine with the system that's moving through tonight and tomorrow. And the 7-day precipitation graphic on the right from the Water Prediction Center is showing most of the heavy precipitation remaining south of New England. Well, we're talking about below normal temperatures and slightly above normal precipitation for the next 2 weeks. So with this, can we get another 2 weeks of controlled melt here, which will be good, but the no melt situation up in Maine is really holding off some potential flood problems in April. We look at the North Atlantic oscillation and the Pacific North American pattern. The North Atlantic remains positive, no blocking. It's been that way all winter. The composite temperature anomalies for March are sort of normal temperatures. The Pacific North American pattern is similarly running near normal, and composite March temperatures are near normal. So where's the cold been coming from? Well, we're going to bring our old friend back, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, as we've shown you most of the winter. Take a look at the lower left-hand graphic. Through the big snow period this winter, we've had a negative East Pacific Oscillation, which what that really means is higher heights on the west coast, high pressure on the west coast, and trough in the east. You can see on the graphic for the first 5 or 6 days in March, that oscillation was positive. We got a little warm spell, and now tending to go negative for the rest of the month. And what that does, the composite temperature anomalies for normal to negative EPO are normal to below normal temperatures across much of the east. In the first 15 days of March, in the lower right graphic, you can see we're anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees below normal across the northeast. So it's remained cold. The 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14 day outlooks are verifying this from CPC, the left top and left bottom image of the 6 to 10 day outlooks. Below normal temperatures in our service area with slightly above normal precipitation. I say slightly above normal because if you look at the 40 line there, normal is 33%, so 40%. Talking with CPC, they lean a little bit towards above normal precip. And the same with the 8 to 14 day on the two right graphics. Colder than normal, slightly above normal precipitation. CPC also updated their April outlook in below normal temperatures, mainly for the first half of the month they're considering. So that seems to be continuing to early April. We look at our surface map on March 22nd. Low pressure that cuts south of New England is reforming and developing over the Nova Scotia and the Maritimes, and very cold still, so whatever precipitation falls, especially in Maine, is in the form of snow. The upper level pattern, we see the cold pool north of the Great Lakes through the St. into the James Bay area with 500 millibar heights and winds wrapping around Hudson Bay into northern and central New England. So it's a cold pattern continuing. And then a week later, the end of the month, March 31st, you can see that very cold aloft over New England, so the cold pattern just continues. Cold pool south of James Bay, and we're in a trough in the east. And what the models all suggested is a ridge in the west, so it's a very cool pattern. I would like to say that in between these two systems, the models are telling us there's a system that's going to cut through the Great Lakes, so there'll be a brief warm-up in the middle of next week with some melting across southern and central New England, southern central New York. We look at our Met Model Ensemble Forecast System. The North American Ensemble Forecast System here is showing locations only with a greater chance of reaching action stage, shown in the next 10-day forecast. But nothing's really showing up in our area. But we looked at the Global Ensemble Forecast System, and a few more areas showed up to minor flooding in New York up to southern Vermont, based on that system that's going to cut through the region in the middle of next week. So in our spring potential flood graphic, we've continued with above normal flood potential in eastern New England, which includes many of the basins from Worcester eastward, basins in Rhode Island, Pawtucket, and the rivers in eastern Maine, Merrimack, eastern New Hampshire, the Merrimack, and the rivers of many of Maine, except for the St. John. We're going to continue with this above normal flood potential. The snow water equivalents in Maine have approached normal and are getting even above normal in eastern Maine, but that's outside of our river forecast system here. This graphic does not talk about ice jam potential, but the ice jam potential is quite a bit above normal, we feel, in the northern New England, especially in Maine, because of the very thick ice entering April. There will be no movement entering April with very thick ice and deep snow cover. Southern New England, south of I-90, into southern New York, and even into the Buffalo area, a lot of the ice has moved or rotted. Still potential for some ice jam flooding, but it's somewhat lessened. Our next outlook is going to be on April 3rd, 2 weeks from now, unless something comes up in between. And that's it. The last pictures are from Cape Cod sea ice, which we got an extreme amount this year. So